Hello and welcome to Eat Sleep Code, the official Telerik podcast. I'm your host, Ed Charbeneau, and my co-host is with me, John Bristowe. How are you doing, John?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good for a hump day. Let's start with a link that you shared, John.
Sure.
Why are you so busy? Like, is this a blog post my wife wrote to me? I'm confused.
That's right. Yeah, it's obviously the soft you, the collective you, not you as in you. But generally, I think a lot of us will find ourselves kind of like spinning plates a lot of the time, and we find ourselves like we have no time at all whatsoever. And I think this post rung true for me a little bit because sometimes I find myself in this situation where people ask me how are things going. I'll be like, it's insane. It's insanely busy. And so I think that another title that I would have accepted for this blog post is how to say no, which is kind of one of the underlying tenets for this. I think that most folks in our industry will find themselves in this sort of status or state where they don't have enough time to do everything that's being pushed on them. So the author goes into the reasonings, and a lot of this should sound familiar, but basically it's about, making sure that you can meet, your deadlines. You want to commit and meet the expectations that you set upon yourself and that others can obviously gear towards. But at the same time, you have to say no from time to time. You have to, cut back delivery, decrease the scope of work, etc. So there are ways in which you can satisfy the requirements that are being put upon you. So it's a good just reminder for folks.
Yeah. You don't have to say yes to everything.
Yes.
It's very true. You don't have to say yes to absolutely everything. Square away enough time for your projects and yourself, and set priorities. Don't exactly what I said. Don't say yes to literally everything just because you're trying to be a nice person.
I know. The other thing is also to be rigorous with your focus time. Don't have social media open. Don't have YouTube open. Don't have distractions. Mark off times in your calendar for certain tasks. Do all your high priority tasks in the beginning of the day when you're the most sharp. Try to book meetings at a shorter time interval, etc. You don't need if you don't need a half an hour, you need only 15 minutes. Make it 15 minutes. Start meetings on time. Take notes. Set reminders. Use automation tools. These and other things you can do to become more productive. At the same time, though, don't forget to say no.
All right, John. We don't have a segue on this one, but
no
software engineering research questions.
Yeah.
What's this post about?
So Greg wrote this blog post. This is a site, neverworkintheory.org, which I love the domain name. These are really interesting questions that I have had myself at times. But I found that this list of questions is fascinating because Greg went into the basically into a lot of where the inspiration for these questions came from. And I think that a lot of people have similar thoughts or feelings about some of these things. Like one that jumped out for me was number 7. Has anyone developed a graphical notion for software development processes like this one for gameplay? And if you click on the link, he goes into the inspiration behind that question where he said, what does the world of music have to offer a game designer? And it talks a little bit about, the sort of inspirational aspects for this and, what are the motivations behind adding music to a game and what are the effects of that? And it might be that you can take that same premise and pivot on something else. So instead of music and video games, it can be some other incentive and software development. And so getting back to the original blog post about, questions around software engineering research, these and other types of questions this author had about various things that kind of, he was scratching his head about and, thinking, openly as a conundrum, why do we use UML or, do we dub things as intelligent just because they pass the Turing test? Or, what are the effects is there data on speakers' fees at tech conferences broken down by age, subject, gender, etc.? So these and other questions are really good ones to consider. And it's just kind of an intellectual exercise more than anything. But I thought they were very interesting.
Yeah. Never thought about doing something like this. There's quite a few of them too.
Yes, there are.
Seems like an interesting.
What labels do people define
process
on GitHub issues? Things like that. So maybe there needs to be some research into some of these things. Thus the title, Software Engineering Research Questions.
Yeah, this looks like it is due for a Trello board. Like I have
right.
similar things in a Trello board. Like if I want to research something, I have like a board set up with.
What is the meaning of life?
What are the things I'm gonna
I'll mark that as
do
done
and
for next
research? Yeah, and I can move them over to different boards when they're answered, or maybe it gives me an opportunity to add links or something to it.
Yes.
Very cool. Stable diffusion is a really big deal. What's stable diffusion, John? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, so stable diffusion is similar to what people have been playing around with called Dolly. Dolly is basically an AI that takes your text description and will generate for you an image based off of that. So stable diffusion is a text to image diffusion model. And so this is an example here where Reddit user Argman123 created this image and then added or supplemented this with text and fed it into stable diffusion and got this as output, for example. Nice. So yeah, these are really taking off, this whole AI generated artwork. People are using this for AI generated news articles, not this example, but the whole premise behind some of these algorithms, these Gen 3 algorithms around AI are generating some really interesting work as a result. People are doing all kinds of interesting sort of tests and experiments with it. And the latest hotness right now is Dolly. But stable diffusion is more open and accessible, and people are doing some really interesting things with it. So in the Trello board that we use for tracking all the links, I included a supplemental attachment to this article where the person using stable diffusion, actually that one, did a rendering animation. So this is an example of a stable diffusion animation based on a description. So tall rectangular black monolith, etc., diffusing into various shapes. And this is what the AI generated as a result of that.
Yeah, we've talked about these things on the show before, and it's funny because my sister is a graphic artist. She pings me the other day and she's like, well, it looks like I'm out of a job. Like this computer stuff's going to take over now. And I'm like, we've been talking about this for a while on our show, and it's not exactly something that you should be scared of, but rather than just take it as another tool for, rapid prototyping ideas, and even allowing your clients to prototype things and introduce them to you, so you can actually go forward and create the final work of art. Like these things all kind of have a look to them.
Yes, they do. A lot of blur.
Yeah, there's a lot of fudging with the blur to make things kind of mesh together, because it's kind of collaging things to some extent.
This one is very Blade Runner-y, by the way, or not Blade Runner, rather Logan's Run, I think is a better apt description. For the shout out to the 70s and 80s kids out there. But I was going to say that I liken a tool like this to Copilot from GitHub.
That's what I said to her. That's exactly what I said.
It's not going to take over your workflow. It's just going to supplement it.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about Dolly, and there was another one that does like retro, like mid-century drawings and stuff. And they come up with some pretty compelling like prototypes, but they all have like this similar, I don't know what it is. They have a smell to them. You can spot them out of a lineup.
And just so much as people have outsourced their jobs to have like 3, 4, 5 programming jobs at once. You've read stories where people have outsourced their work. I could imagine someone's doing this right now as a graphic designer. They've got an open account for Dolly or for stable diffusion, and they're simply outsourcing their generation image to clients this way, I would imagine. I'm speculating, obviously, but I know that license models say otherwise, but That's
There's
something that I
another
thought about.
conundrum here too with licensing, because a lot of these AI things are working off of data that they use for a model, and
Yes.
a lot of that data is not licensed data. Like a lot of images in their database that they've had to go through, and it's splicing together this image data and reinterpreting it,
Mhm.
and it's like, how does the license apply to, say, the pyramid or whatever it
Sure.
took to create this pyramid in the sand dunes or the
Yeah,
tree?
you know what's funny? You can tell that these things are off because if you look at the lighting, I mean, I don't mean to be kind of a stickler here, but if you take a look at that one that you're hovering over right now, if you take a
Hmm.
look at the shading that's on the pier those sand dunes versus the glare that's off the light versus what's in the sky, it doesn't this is why it doesn't feel right to me. There's
Hmm.
just it's missing. It would be like if you were playing Doom or some game system with the lighting system all messed up. You'd be like, the shadows don't make sense. Like none of the lighting makes sense. Like why are these in shade and these ones aren't? Like this is why
Yeah.
it looks off to me. So
Yeah. It's almost like when you see a 2D image that's like a skeuomorphic image in a 3D space.
yeah.
Like it doesn't look right, and you can
Mm.
pick it out from a mile away.
Oh
But
sure.
yeah, they all have a feel to them though.
Hmm.
I kind of compared it to when I was talking to my sister. I was like, there's this thing called Bootstrap, and it lets you create you know websites that look decent and stuff. But you can always tell a Bootstrap
Yes.
website, no matter how much effort goes
There's a
into
smell.
like making that
Yes.
unique feel to it. You can tell it's a Bootstrap site. Like people will
Yes.
pay to not have that smell in their designs.
Yes.
So yeah.
Agreed.
Anyway, long story short, I don't think artists have
No.
anything to
No, I
fear,
think they're
but
fine.
rather than use it as a tool. And speaking of artists, like, I mean, this is like happy little trees for your cursor,
I had
John.
to
This,
I had
this
to
is
include this. I had to include this. So, back in the 90s, we had web designs with GIFs and under construction animations and, automatic MIDI files playing and scrolling cursors, and this is just an homage to that, basically. So these are scrolling
and it's
cursors that have
a
been built.
one-click add to your site.
Sure, sure, why
Yeah,
not? So these are a variety of cursor effects that have been implemented, that are quite
that
funny,
one
actually.
might do what the fairy does. That one's pretty good.
Yeah,
Oh, I remember
if you've
this was a
done
Windows
solitaire,
3.1 thing.
Windows, etc. Yeah,
The good old trailing mouse cursor. I actually had like a icon library that helped with this. It was like Icon Do It. Yeah, it was actually called that.
nice.
That actually had like all these weird cursor plugins for Windows 3.1. I remember
Brilliant.
getting that for Christmas one year. Yeah, that was a big deal back in the emoji reign.
Not as yes, exactly. This is
Some of
this is
these are
what
a
your
lot
customers will pay
cooler than
for
I
sure.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that these effects have been built basically pretty easily. They're based on just a little bit of JavaScript that's been written in, and there's a variety of ways in which you can override them. If you take a look at the GitHub, they talk about it there, but just simple sort of commands that you can execute in context of JavaScript. I do like the rainbow one.
Nice. Very nostalgic. We're gonna make a jump to
Yes,
performance improvements in .NET
what a
7.
hard
I
context
saw
switch.
this come across the wire too, John. There was a tweet that I'm trying to remember who put it out. Is it Emo? Maybe it was Emo. Said
Okay.
like every time he thinks like they can't squeeze any more
Oh,
performance
sure.
out of .NET, they manage to do it again, and it's like he said, I can understand the performance increases we got from like .NET Framework to .NET Core, and then .NET Core to .NET 5, and he's like, and then I was surprised, when .NET 6 came along, and it was like I thought we were at the peak of things, and then .NET 7, and it's like here we go again.
Yes. Yes, here we go again. So Stephen Taub's done this for many years. He's a performance wonk at Microsoft, and he's always written a little bit about some of the performance improvements that have gone into the latest versions of .NET. And this blog post is no exception to basically talking a lot about what they've done in terms of performance. So TLDR, as he mentions here, .NET 7 is fast, really fast, 1,000 performance impacting PRs, et cetera, et cetera. So I like it when you have a team that's dedicated to something like this to try and actively improve the performance.
Hmm.
As much as we like to utilize tools, sometimes we get things wrong. And, you need folks who know a great deal about these things to come in and say, listen, the way you've done this is probably not optimal. So let's improve it. So you can take your pick. I mean, there's just any
It's a
number
lot of
of places
libraries
where,
there
yeah, I know.
tackling
a
here.
lot of I know a lot of stuff that's in there. So, some of the stuff that most folks will be concerned about is like arrays, string spans, JSON, networking.
Hmm.
Networking is a big one for me because obviously we rely heavily on APIs. So there's a
Link.
lot of improvements there. Some of the improvements aren't blow out of the water type improvements, but they're looking at sometimes a 10x performance improvement, but you're measuring in nanoseconds now. So it's like, all right, how fast do you really want this? So anyways, definitely a blog post worth checking out, reading about. It's certainly an intellectual exercise to go through it. It gets you excited, right? So that's
Hmm.
that's why these blog posts are popular, because people get excited, like, I want this now. But yeah, there's lots to look into
The
this. I
native
mean, when you scroll,
AOT
I
stuff
know
is really
when your scroll
interesting
bar goes
because of
like this,
Blazor.
it's, yeah, 100%. When your
So,
scroll bar goes like this in your browser, it's a long read. I mean,
so it
look at
looks
your scroll
like,
bar
I
there;
mean,
it's tiny.
they knocked like 1.5 meg off of a library they compiled with native AOT. This is a huge deal for something like Blazor, where you can compile things ahead of time instead of using interpreted mode and have them run
Right.
faster, but then it balloons the size of the library up. But if they're able to knock like 1 meg off of it, that's a big deal for something like that. Look, and there they are. Saw in performance startup improve by 10 to 20%. It's an exact example of an app being tracked by a benchmarking system. So they do go directly into Blazor there. I haven't read this yet either. I just assumed that this where it might be going. That's very cool.
Yeah, usually when I ship new software, my charts go in the opposite direction.
Make it bigger.
Yes. So yeah,
This is
worth
really
checking out.
great.
Yeah.
This reminds me of another .NET related article that I've posted here, John.
Yes.
They're rewriting the extension model for Visual Studio.
Because why not?
Yeah, this is a good thing. I know we do a lot of Visual Studio extensions here at Progress, and it's not one of the easier things that we do, but it adds a lot of value to the tooling that we create.
Yes.
So if Microsoft is willing to break down barriers and make it easier for us to deploy these plugins, then I am all for it. Some of the things that are helpful with this is the fact that it's now 64-bit. So they added extensions for updating your extensions to being 64-bit. That's kind of been in there for a little while, since the latest version of Visual Studio anyway. But they've added this out of process support. So if your plugin or Visual Studio, one of the two happens to hit a snag, long processing, or it crashes, God forbid, it doesn't take down the other. So they're kind of independent on their own process. So if there's something that you launch off of one of our plugins, and it's off trying to convert a project or update it or something like that, and it hits a snag and crashes, it doesn't take down Visual Studio with it. This is a big deal. It's super helpful to have that kind of user experience and not frustrate people when that type of thing happens. They've also updated their UI framework. So this is, you right click on the context menu and start your tool that you've shipped for Visual Studio, and now you've got your own UI. Maybe there's a wizard in there that you've created to do something with the project. You can actually write those things in XAML, and it says in here, if you've worked with a Maui app, then you'll be pretty familiar with it. So it looks like they're taking this XAML Maui style of Xamarin Forms type of approach to writing the UI part of it, and that'll help as well. So
yes,
all for it. Looks great. on paper here. We'll have to see how it works in practice. And
Well,
hopefully we
they're
can.
borrowing the model. They're borrowing the model that worked well when language server providers first came out. So the language
Mhm.
server protocol, LSP, was something that really benefited a lot of customers and users of IDEs like Visual Studio, various JetBrains IDEs, take your
Mhm.
pick, Sublime Text, etc. This notion that rather than having proprietary rather than having proprietary plugins run in process and only be supported for that IDE, let's standardize the way in which we communicate to plugins through this protocol, LSP, and we will use it at a code basis to do, hey, here's my code snippet. How does it look? Yes, this is good, or no, it's not, or here are the syntax highlights, etc. That
Mhm.
model works well, and plus it ran out of process, or you had the option to develop it that way. They're taking the same approach here because they know it works. It provides better robustness. It takes pressure off of the main host environment. You can eventually get back. Like, it's kind of like saying, hey, plugin, get back to me when you're ready and let me know when you're happy to tell me something, etc. So they're taking that same approach, which is the right approach, I think.
Mhm. All right, John. Fuzzing Go APIs for SQL injection. So we're talking about security stuff, are
A
we?
little bit, yeah. We're talking a little bit about Go 118 plus.
Mhm.
Fuzzing is, well, actually, it's before that, but fuzzing actually provides a really nice capability for you to inject random values into your unit tests. It's a feature of Go 118, and what this is basically an article that talks about if you're basically creating a service based on Go, you can add fuzzing to your tests. So Go out of the box has a number of basic types of tests. So they have unit testing. They also have benchmarking for performance testing. So you can say, run this across to n number of instances. They have fuzzing, which allows you to basically populate values randomly, and it will generate those values for you. And so this article goes into detail about if you're going to create a service based on Go, here's how you may want to test against random inputs using the fuzzing capability of Go. So
Mhm.
just to show folks here, in that first line there, it says fuzz input user, and it says ftesting.f. The testing module provides things like B for benchmark, T for test, general unit testing, F for fuzzing, etc. And so when you want to test something out like that, it has a very easy to understand sort of premise. And so you load it up with an example, and then you say f.fuzz, and it does the magic for you of generating random values and then basically throwing them across the wall to your endpoint. So it's a good practice to start looking at things like this. I know that there are fuzzing libraries for other languages, including
Mhm.
.NET, and you are encouraged to use those because what they do is they actively test random inputs, and random inputs can and will screw up APIs, services, endpoints that you host. And it's important to mitigate against those. And it's the common scenario we've always talked about: validate your inputs, trust nothing, etc., etc. So this is
Yeah.
something that you could apply to any language, basically.
Yeah. Users will always find a way to break stuff.
Sure.
And for some reason, I'm usually that guy. Like, and I don't do it intentionally. Some people, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I always find the bugs. I always trip over all the bad things that are possible to hurt myself on. And I don't know how I managed to do it, but I always do it. So
One way
maybe
you
I
can do
should
it, and
be like a human, like fuzzing as a service.
sure, fuzzing as a service. You could actually do the same thing by just putting your young toddler in front of a keyboard. That works as well. I've broken software that way as well, just having
Maybe
my
that's it.
son slap on a keyboard.
I'm
So
like a toddler in front of a keyboard, and that's why I
sure,
run into all these
just
problems.
that's right. Just slap on the keyboard long enough, you'll break it. One
I love
way,
how
shout out to
when when I report a bug, like the developer is always like, "Yeah, we've never seen this one before. You're the only one. Like nobody's
yes.
ever brought this up."
So one of the ways in which you can break things as well, and this is a shout out to Progress, is you can use a tool like Fiddler. So
Hmm.
Fiddler is really great because what you can do is you can act as a man in the middle, and you can mess with the payloads. And so oftentimes it's not even just fuzzing like random inputs. It's like, what happens if I change the ID value? this payload.
Mhm.
So if I've got a request going out and it's a JSON sort of I'm doing an HTTP put or something like that, and I'm sending alongside with the body of the request some JSON payload to update something. If I mess with that payload and I start injecting values like, let me change the ID, like I've got an ID value here, let me change that from 1 to 2, or from 1 to -1, or to A, or to something, and then see what happens. It's funny. It's not funny as in like, haha. It's peculiar. It's
Mhm.
interesting to see the side effects.
Yeah.
I've seen in services where you can disassociate records in the backend database. It's not even T-SQL injection. It's a logic failure where you can disassociate records. Like, you typically set this up where, the resource you're sending across the wire, if it has an ID value and it's based on underlying some database, chances are there's an ER diagram floating around there, and there's some architecture written that way. So that means there's going to be a foreign key. If you
Mhm.
start messing with that foreign key, you can disassociate things really easily. You'll never be able to reach them again unless you go directly through the API layer.
Yeah.
So these and other ways of messing with things are kind of interesting, and you're able to poke holes through people's logic, especially APIs. And so fuzzing is one way, just tracing the output or inputs rather through mine in the middle, like Fiddler or Postman or Wireshark. It's one of my favorite tests to do, is just to say, let me delete a value. Now let me change a value. Now let me make the value like super big, or a negative value, or change the type, or whatever. That tends to mess up APIs pretty well.
Yeah. I might have mentioned it on the stream before. Like, I sniffed out one. We acquired a company at my old job, not Progress, but my old job. We acquired this company, and they had an HR grievance system that they had created internally, and it had like all sorts of
Sequential
very
IDs.
private information in it. Yeah. And they sent it to me for review, and I was like, the first thing I did is logged in, saw the record number at the top of the URL, changed the ID, and like started digging through everybody's personal information. And then I called the
Quickly
CIO and was like, yeah, shut this down like now. This thing is a security nightmare. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Like, get it off the network. Oh man.
Good times.
Yeah. This is a very John post here. I got this specifically for you, John.
You got the vibes. You got the John vibes from this?
Yeah. This is, I thought I was going to look on here and actually see that you wrote this, but apparently you didn't. So 12 examples of revolutionary tech that's not living up to the hype. And
yes. I love how they have the
let's see.
Photo. Yeah.
You are not privy to this article, John. Can you guess like 6 of the 12?
All right. Definitely, the VR headset is one.
That's a giveaway, but it's not necessarily VR though.
Okay, AR.
You're getting warmer.
Like okay, maybe like things like, okay, any augmentation of any sense whatsoever.
We talked about it last week. It starts with smell, an M. Metaverse motion, is one of them for sure.
Metaverse, right? The metaverse, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's those things, and this is very reminiscent of some of the technologies, websites you saw come out in the 2000s, the .com era. It's like sockpuppets.com. It's like, really. Anyways, so there's this. I think 3D printing would maybe fall in this list as well.
Oh, look at you! You're getting good. That is on there.
Okay. Certain social networks, I would say. Those are like, that's like a burning forest.
I don't think they mentioned any social networks. It's more like tech stacks or tech, buzzwords.
Okay. Certain IoT devices come to mind, like anything that goes into your home that augments your experience,
home automation,
quote unquote, in the home. Like, why would you bug your own house? Things like that. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, anyways, 3D printing was 3D number one there.
Yep, there you go. Perfect.
So yeah, like, it was supposed to be like super revolutionary. It's still pretty expensive. Yep. It's kind of hard to get into. People aren't sharing as much 3D like what do you call them? Like the files that they use to print off of. Yes. It just hasn't caught on like people had thought it would. AI is another one.
Yes.
it's people have really big visions of what it's supposed to be, but
Sure.
as we were discussing earlier with the images and how they're easy to spot as fakes and whatnot,
Yeah.
then it hasn't quite taken off.
Lights off. Hey, I called that one too. There you go. Yeah, the whole "don't bug my house" and you know, don't automate my entire home.
Yeah, this is right on the lines of the automation stuff you're talking about, John. Like you got 3 of the 12. That's pretty impressive. So yeah, we fight with this lights off one every night. Like we have one room in the house that is the experimental.
I know. Hey Alexa, get out of my house.
Yeah, I don't want to say her name because she will respond. But it's like, the clapper was ahead of its time because it actually freaking worked. But we have these lights in our bedroom, and every night it's me screaming 3 times, if not more, like to turn the lights off for bed.
Yes.
The metaverse, we talked pretty heavily about this last week. Like, 100%. Yeah, it hasn't quite got there at all.
Well, that one's a joke.
Yeah, Web3. These are kind of one and the same, but yeah, cryptocurrencies. They've taken a pretty hard dive.
So number 7 is interesting to me because we actually I am a fan of workflow tools like Zapier and Workato, and those do have a benefit. So I think that the author is missing out on the benefit of workflow oriented solutions in the no code, low code solution. I think that's not right. I think number 7, there is a well established, like Zapier is a perfect example of a well established low code, no code development oriented style workflow. Workflow is perfect solution for that. And I think that's wrong. I think 7 is wrong.
So for app development, I think this is a terrible idea. It always ends 100%. With workflow, it always ends with totally I need to hire real developers now that don't need to just understand the business. They also need to understand code. And now I've added a third. They also need to understand the no code framework that we mangled together with the other 2 problems. So yeah,
a good example of this is my son does this with tools like Scratch, for example. Like that is kind of coding, but those are low code, no code solutions for game development, and they do work, and kids build games with them. But I would say, I think what we're doing I think a better term for this is not low code, no code, but workflow generation or workflow creation. Workflow creation is a perfect application for this sort of scenario because you drag and drop, you organize things you want, and it works well. And I use a solution that does this for some of my processes. And I'm not saying, look at me, I'm awesome, but I'm just saying it works and it works well. And I wouldn't want to code it. And I'm glad that there's this drag and drop thing for me to do.
I'll give you another good example too, is Azure ML. It's a like a no code AI solution. So you can train models and create web APIs based off of those models. It's really great. Machine learning has possibly some avenues for this no code 100%, stuff. 100%. It's different than just coding an app style, business logic and stuff. It's very much a workflow process like you described. Decentralized autonomous organizations. That's a buzzword. I'm not even. That's how bad it failed. We don't even know what it is, John. Blockchain.
I don't know. I think
hit and miss.
Fully autonomous vehicles. I think this is fully autonomous. Yes.
Yeah.
Fully autonomous.
Yeah. The keyword there, fully autonomous. Yes. It even says semi-autonomous is here, but not really.
I've been in a Tesla where it's on fully automation mode, and I do not feel comfortable at all.
Yeah, everybody doesn't feel safe in those, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh no, it's nothing. It's not that I don't like I love the car. I love it. It's just
no. I mean, with the AI going, they don't feel safe with the AI driving.
Just because I'm in technology, I don't it's me. It's me. It's not the
Yeah, I don't
car.
trust
It's
it
nothing
either.
like that. I just don't feel comfortable knowing that there's a computer driving this thing because
We
I've seen computers do weird things in my career. That's all, and it's something I have to get over. More than
I'm
anything.
pretty
So.
sure we had one on the show that I shared where the car was behind a horse and buggy. Did I share
Oh, and it
that on
rendered it
here?
as a truck or something?
Yeah, it rendered as a truck, and then it like kept like flickering between like different models.
Sure.
It's like you could almost sense the AI going, I've never seen this thing before, but it kind of looks like a truck. No,
Yeah.
wait, that's a human. No, wait, that's a motorcycle. No,
No,
wait,
it's
it's a truck
sign. No, it's a
again.
green light. Go.
No, it's a truck with a person walking very closely behind it. Like it wasn't trained on that ever, so it can't figure out what it is.
Yeah, that's
That part scares me. The this okay,
That's
12's a
total.
miss.
That is the worst one on this
Yeah.
list. That is 100% not hype.
No.
110% not hype.
Yeah, the cloud is there.
The cloud is eating the world. Are you kidding me?
I was gonna say, like, just look at Microsoft's financials and tell me the cloud's not working.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were credible up until that last one.
Yes.
Speaking of failing technologies or failing to impress or catch on, I'm going to talk a little bit about AR and VR, John. Your favorite subject of the day.
All right.
So people
degeneration
keep
we're looking at?
saying, yeah, right.
Sorry.
People keep saying that Apple is going to unveil a headset. They've been beating this drum for, I want to say 3 years or more now. And we have yet to see any sort of device. There is some sort of AR thing happening with the fall Apple event, though. I don't think it's going to be glasses. I think it's just going to be their API kits and stuff that are being updated, and maybe some features for their phones. So it looks like they are going to launch the AR kit viewer as a built-in viewer to iOS. And there's some sort of Easter egg that you can see in the launch thing here. I don't know if this is it as an animation or if there's something you actually have to hold your phone in front of it to see. But apparently there's things being kind of teased there. So I thought that was interesting.
An app that I know it's jumping exactly on the example here, but it does align to something that I've seen. There's an app that I use called Night Sky on iOS. That's fantastic. You point the camera at the night sky and it will draw the constellations around certain stars that are in the sky. It's fantastic. It will also show you things like, where is the location of the space station? Where's Hubble? What's that star right there? And we'll circle it and do a fly out and show you what those things are. Now, I'm not saying that this event is this. What I am saying is maybe they're going to use a night sky like example to demonstrate their AR dev kit, possibly.
Yeah, that could
total speculation.
And speaking of space and virtual reality and augmented reality, this is interesting, John. You may actually like this. This is cool. I know you don't own an AR headset, but we've got the Artemis launch coming up.
Yes.
And you can watch it in VR now. They tried actually to do this, but the launch was scrubbed.
Yes.
So you can't actually see it, but this is kind of the view that you're going to get with your VR headset. It's kind of an immersive experience, which I think is cool. And then you'll be able to watch the rocket go up. It looks like they have some animations here too that are kind of giving you a description of what you're seeing as it, as they kind of hype the launch.
I'm with you.
I think this looks cool. It looks interesting. The quality apparently is fairly low, but we're getting there. It's baby steps.
Okay.
And then while we're on the topic of space, I have to kind of hype this game that I've gotten. It's the sequel to a game that I have already, but I went ahead and got the sequel this week. It is phenomenal. I love this game so much. It is like a puzzle escape room style game for the VR headset. It's called Red Matter, and the sequel is Red Matter 2. It is a gorgeous game. It is absolutely like a compelling game to play as well as look at. So if you're into like space stuff and you have a VR headset and you want to check out like a next gen style game, this is a really, really cool one. If you're like a fan of like Myst, if you ever played that, like it kind of falls in that style of gameplay and what do you call it, like mystery and stuff like that. It tells a really unique story. Just a great overall game to try out if you're getting into VR or maybe already have one. It's a really small studio too, which is it's nice to support like some of the smaller devs, and it's not like this huge AAA game studio that you might expect to get like published by EA or any of that stuff. So that's also a little nice have. You're supporting some of the smaller guys out there. This is a really cool one.
Nice.
I just got tons of nice stuff to say about it. I've had a blast playing the original, and then this one just takes you beyond the universe that they presented to you the first time. And it's kind of like got a 60s Cold War vibe to it. So the art style is really just kind of cool and unique. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's nice. Great stuff, John. You should try it out, man. You got to get one of these headsets. I'm telling you.
I won't.
You're missing out.
I'm okay with that. Okay with missing out.
One more thing that you might actually appreciate about this, though, John. I purchased this game on PC VR because I have a PC that can handle the graphics that you see in these screenshots here. It's pretty impressive graphics in this game. Very detailed environments, that sort of thing, high resolution textures, and all of that. So I bought the original on PC VR, and then I went ahead and bought the sequel on PC VR as well. I kind of actually regret it a little bit. So this game developer went through some real, like, we were talking about performance tuning with .NET 7. Like that's the depth of performance tuning I feel like they took with this, because the side-by-sides I've seen of this running on the Oculus 2 versus PC VR, like you cannot tell the difference between the two. That is impressive all on its own. So I wish I would have actually tried it on the headset before I bought it on PC VR, because it's a little more convenient when it's all contained in the headset than it is having to either you kind of VPN into your system, or you have to have a cable that's hooked to it. The wireless stuff, if the kids get on the network, it kind of bogs the game down a little bit. It might get a little hitchy with the graphics. I would have much rather had it on headset. If I would have suspected that the graphics were the same, I would have gone ahead and bought it that way. So if you haven't seen Red Matter or Red Matter 2, check those out. They are phenomenal games. One of my favorite VR games right now. And then we won't have a show probably for the next 2 weeks, John. I have to check on next week. I'm prepping for DevReach, and then I will be at DevReach. So we're going to have some stuff on the channel here live from DevReach. It may not be this exact show, but there will be lots of things being streamed live during the conference. And then the conference is free to attend virtually as well. So make sure you check that out too.
Nice. Looks awesome.
Yep. Any parting words, John?
Nope. Just other than make sure to say no, and try not to outsource all your drawing to an AI, because the lighting will be wrong.
And John's gonna go check out that game I just mentioned, aren't you?
I will not.
You're missing out, man. You're really missing out. You got to give it a try sometime.
It's called reality. I'll go outside. Thanks.
You're gonna go outside into space? Wow, that's cool, John. I know
we are in space. We just to let you know, everything around.
Oh, you're gonna save the. How's it go? Save it for the semantics dome.
You're gonna go in space. We are space. Everything around us is space.
The game lets you actually travel to other planets and worlds, but
fine.
I digress.
I'll have a glass of wine then. Whatever.
Have,
They'll take me to a different reality.
all right. Take care, everybody.